Diseases women inherited from their ancestors, the hidden genetic legacy. What if the most dangerous thing you inherited wasn't your mother's eyes or your grandmother's smile, but a disease written into your DNA before you were ever born? Right now, inside every woman is a medical history spanning hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. Silent. Invisible. Waiting. Some of these inherited conditions have changed the course of empires. Others have quietly shaped families for generations without anyone knowing. And all of them reveal something extraordinary about survival, biology, and what it truly means to be female. This isn't just medicine. This is ancestry. And these are the diseases women inherited from their ancestors. Every single one of us carries an invisible inheritance. Not just the color of our eyes or the shape of our face, but something far more profound. We carry the medical history of every woman who came before us, coded into every cell of our body. Today, we're going to explore 5 diseases that have traveled through generations of women, passed down like family heirlooms nobody wanted. Some of these conditions you've heard of. Others might surprise you. But all of them tell us something remarkable about human survival, adaptation, and the incredible complexity of being female. This is the story of the diseases women inherited from their ancestors. Let's begin with perhaps the most well-known inherited condition affecting women, hereditary breast and ovarian cancer linked to BRCA gene mutations. In 2013, actress Angelina Jolie made headlines worldwide when she announced she'd undergone a preventive double mastectomy. Her mother had died of ovarian cancer at age 56. Her grandmother died of ovarian cancer at 45. Jolie carried a mutation in her BRCA1 gene, giving her an 87% chance of developing breast cancer and a 50% chance of ovarian cancer. But where did these mutations come from? The BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, their names literally stand for breast cancer gene 1 and 2, are actually our protectors. They produce proteins that repair damaged DNA and keep our cells growing normally. When these genes work properly, they're like spell checkers for our genetic code, catching mistakes before they become problems. But sometimes, these genes themselves contain errors. And when that happens, the protective mechanism fails. These mutations can be traced back hundreds, even thousands of years. Scientists have found that certain BRCA mutations are more common in specific populations. Among Ashkenazi Jewish women, about 1 in 40 carries a BRCA mutation 10 times higher than the general population. These particular mutations can be traced back to founders who lived in Eastern Europe centuries ago, in small, isolated communities where genetic variations became concentrated. What's fascinating is that these mutations survived. You might think, if these genes cause such deadly diseases, why didn't natural selection eliminate them? The answer tells us something profound about evolution. These mutations typically cause problems after women have children. From evolution's perspective, if you've already passed on your genes, what happens afterward doesn't affect the gene pool. It's harsh, but it's how natural selection works. Today, about 1 in 400 to 800 women in the general population carries a BRCA mutation. If you inherit one from your mother or father, yes, fathers can carry and pass on these mutations too. You inherit not just a gene, but a legacy of risk that stretches back through your family tree. Modern medicine has given women options their ancestors never had. Genetic testing, enhanced screening, preventive surgeries, and targeted therapies have transformed what was once an invisible threat into a manageable risk. But the inheritance remains, passed from mother to daughter, a reminder that we are all connected to those who came before us. Our next inherited disease has a nickname, the royal disease. And for good reason. It changed the course of European history. Hemophilia is a bleeding disorder where blood doesn't clot properly. The most common type, hemophilia A, is caused by a mutation on the X chromosome. Here's where genetics gets interesting for women. Women have 2 X chromosomes. Men have 1 X and 1 Y. If a woman inherits 1 mutated X chromosome, her other normal X chromosome usually compensates. She becomes a carrier but rarely shows severe symptoms. But if she has a son, there's a 50% chance he'll inherit that mutated X chromosome. And because he has only one X chromosome, he has no backup. He develops full hemophilia. This is why hemophilia is sometimes called a women's disease that affects men. Women carry it, pass it on, but typically don't suffer from it themselves, though female carriers can experience milder bleeding symptoms. The most famous carrier in history was Queen Victoria of England. She passed the hemophilia gene to at least 3 of her 9 children. Through her daughters and granddaughters, the mutation spread through the royal families of Spain, Germany, and Russia like an invisible thread connecting thrones across Europe. Perhaps the most tragic story is that of Tsarevich Alexei, son of the last Russian Tsar Nicholas II. Alexei inherited hemophilia from his mother Alexandra, Queen Victoria's granddaughter. His illness influenced his mother's dependence on the mystic Rasputin, who seemed able to help the boy during bleeding episodes. This relationship eroded the royal family's credibility and contributed to the conditions that led to the Russian Revolution. One boy's inherited disease helped topple an empire. But where did Queen Victoria's mutation come from? Her parents didn't have hemophilia, and there's no record of it in her ancestors. Scientists believe it was a spontaneous mutation, a random copying error when her genetic code was being formed. From that single error in one woman's DNA, the mutation spread through generations of royalty. Today, hemophilia affects about 1 in 5,000 male births. For the women who carry the gene, the experience can be complicated. Some experience heavy menstrual bleeding or prolonged bleeding after childbirth. They face difficult decisions about having children, knowing each son has a 50% chance of inheriting a condition that, before modern treatment, meant most boys didn't survive to adulthood. Modern medicine has transformed hemophilia from a death sentence into a manageable chronic condition. Clotting factor replacement therapy allows people with hemophilia to live relatively normal lives. But the gene remains, passed through mothers who may never know they carry it until they have an affected son. Now let's talk about an inheritance that comes exclusively from mothers. No exceptions. Ever. Inside nearly every cell in your body are tiny structures called mitochondria. Think of them as the cell's power plants, converting the food we eat into energy our cells can use. You inherited all of your mitochondria from your mother. None from your father. When a sperm fertilizes an egg, the mitochondria in the sperm are marked for destruction. Only the mother's mitochondria survive. This means mitochondrial DNA is passed down in an unbroken maternal line stretching back thousands of generations. Your mitochondrial DNA is identical to your mother's, her mother's, her mother's mother's, all the way back to what scientists call mitochondrial Eve, a woman who lived in Africa about 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. But sometimes, mutations occur in mitochondrial DNA. And when they do, they can cause devastating diseases. Mitochondrial diseases are rare but severe. They affect about 1 in 4,000 people. Because mitochondria provide energy, organs that need the most energy, the brain, heart, muscles, and nerves, are hit hardest. Symptoms can include muscle weakness, neurological problems, seizures, vision loss, heart problems, and developmental delays. What makes these diseases particularly challenging is their variability. Because each cell contains hundreds of mitochondria, some cells might have mostly mutated mitochondria while others have mostly normal ones. This creates a spectrum of severity that can differ dramatically even within the same family. Consider Miller syndrome, mitochondrial encephalopathy, lactic acidosis, and stroke-like episodes. Children with this condition might seem normal in early childhood, then begin experiencing stroke-like episodes, seizures, and progressive muscle weakness. The disease can be mild in one family member and devastating in another, all from the same inherited mutation. A mother with a mitochondrial mutation will pass it to all her children, both sons and daughters. But only her daughters can pass it to the next generation. Sons with mitochondrial disease reach a genetic dead end; they cannot pass the mutation to their children. This creates unique ethical and emotional challenges for women. A woman who carries a mitochondrial mutation knows that if she has children, she will definitely pass on mutated mitochondria. The question is how severe the disease will be, and that's often impossible to predict. Recently, medical science has developed a controversial solution, mitochondrial replacement therapy, sometimes called three-parent IVF. The technique takes the nucleus from the mother's egg, containing most of her DNA, and places it in a donor egg with healthy mitochondria. The resulting child has DNA from 3 people, nuclear DNA from both parents, and mitochondrial DNA from the donor. The United Kingdom approved this technique in 2015, making it the first country to legalize three-parent babies. It remains controversial, raising questions about genetic modification and what we're willing to change in the human genome. But for mothers carrying devastating mitochondrial mutations, it offers something their ancestors never had, a chance to break the chain. Some inherited diseases hide in families for generations, getting worse with each passing. Fragile X syndrome is one of them, and it reveals something strange about how genetic mutations can grow over time. Fragile X syndrome is the most common inherited cause of intellectual disability and the most common known genetic cause of autism. It's caused by a mutation in the FMR1 gene on the X chromosome. But here's what makes it unusual: the mutation is a stutter. Inside the gene is a sequence of DNA CGG that repeats over and over. In most people, this sequence repeats 5 to 44 times. But in Fragile X, it repeats over 200 times, sometimes even over 1,000 times. This excessive repetition silences the gene, preventing it from producing a protein crucial for brain development. The strange part? The repetition grows. A grandmother might have 70 repeats, enough to put her in the premutation range, but not enough to cause full Fragile X syndrome. She might never even know she carries it. But when she passes the gene to her daughter, the repeats might expand to 90. Still not enough for full syndrome, but getting worse. Then that daughter has a son, and suddenly the repeats explode to 300. That son develops full Fragile X syndrome. This phenomenon is called genetic anticipation. The disease gets worse in successive generations. It's like a genetic time bomb, ticking through families. Boys with Fragile X typically have intellectual disabilities, characteristic facial features, anxiety, and often autism. Girls who inherit the full mutation usually have milder symptoms because their second X chromosome provides some compensation. But women with the premutation face their own challenges. About 20% of women with the premutation develop Fragile X-associated primary ovarian insufficiency. Their ovaries stop working before age 40, causing early menopause and infertility. It's counterintuitive. Having fewer repeats of the mutation causes ovarian problems, while having more repeats doesn't. Genetics doesn't always make intuitive sense. Additionally, both men and women with the premutation can develop Fragile X-associated tremor ataxia syndrome later in life, causing tremors, balance problems, and cognitive decline similar to Parkinson's disease. Fragile X affects about 1 in 4,000 males and 1 in 8,000 females. But carriers of the premutation are much more common, about 1 in 150 to 300 women. Many have no idea they carry it until they have an affected child or grandchild. This creates complicated family dynamics. A woman might discover she carries the premutation only after her son is diagnosed. Then she realizes she inherited it from her mother, who never knew she carried it. Suddenly, 3 generations are dealing with an inheritance nobody saw coming. Testing is available, but many families remain unaware. Unlike diseases like BRCA-related cancers that have received widespread public attention, Fragile X remains relatively unknown despite how common it is. Women can carry and pass on the mutation for generations without anyone in the family knowing what's growing in their genes. Our final inherited condition isn't a single disease but a whole category, autoimmune diseases. And they reveal something profound about being female. Autoimmune diseases occur when your immune system, which normally protects you, mistakenly attacks your own body. Lupus attacks multiple organs. Rheumatoid arthritis attacks joints. Hashimoto's disease attacks the thyroid. Multiple sclerosis attacks the nervous system. Here's the striking fact: about 80% of people with autoimmune diseases are women. Some diseases, like Sjgren syndrome, affect 9 women for every 1 man. Lupus affects 9 women for every man. This isn't coincidence, this is written in our biology. Scientists believe multiple factors contribute. Women have two X chromosomes, which means we have double the X-linked immune genes. Our immune systems are naturally more reactive they need to be because we carry children and must distinguish between our own tissue and the developing fetus. Our hormones, particularly estrogen, influence immune function. Many autoimmune diseases have genetic components that run in families. If your mother has lupus, your risk is higher. If your grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis, you're more susceptible. These aren't single gene disorders like hemophilia, they're influenced by multiple genes, each adding a small increase in risk. What's fascinating is that these genetic susceptibilities likely provided evolutionary advantages. A hypervigilant immune system protects against infections during pregnancy and childbirth, which historically were extremely dangerous. Women with more reactive immune systems might have survived infections that killed others. The trade-off? Later in life, that same immune vigilance can turn against the body. Autoimmune diseases often appear during or after reproductive years after women have had children. Once again, we see evolution's harsh calculus. If a genetic trait doesn't prevent reproduction, it remains in the gene pool even if it causes suffering later. Modern research is uncovering more about these genetic connections. Scientists have identified over 100 genetic variants associated with increased autoimmune disease risk. Some are common in certain populations, suggesting ancient founders passed them down through generations. For women today, this means awareness of family history is crucial. If your mother, grandmother, or aunts had autoimmune diseases, your risk is elevated. Early detection and treatment can make an enormous difference. Unlike our ancestors who suffered without diagnosis or treatment, modern women have options. But the inheritance remains carried through maternal lines, sometimes skipping generations, sometimes affecting multiple family members. It's a reminder that our immune systems, like so much of our biology, are shaped by millennia of evolutionary pressures we're only beginning to understand. We've explored 5 ways women inherit disease from their ancestors: BRCA mutations and cancer risk, hemophilia carried silently through generations, mitochondrial diseases passed down the maternal line, Fragile X syndrome that grows worse over time, and autoimmune diseases that disproportionately affect women.